Hello, what we're going to be covering in this video is lesson 2.9 from App Development with Swift. This lesson covers controls in action. The video is part of a lecture that was recorded in spring of 2019. So I'll go back into Xcode again, and we're going to create a new Xcode project. So I'll go ahead and select that. And it'll be a single view app. And what we're going to call it is Common Input Controls. And we'll click on Next, and I will save it onto my desktop. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create some controls. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a button to our storyboard. So what we need to do is we need to click on the main storyboard to go ahead and open up that storyboard. And then we're going to go into our little object library, the circle with the square inside of it, and click on it, and we're going to type in button. And what we're going to do is we're going to drag a button onto our area and then kind of, I don't know, put it about a third up to the top, and we'll drop the button in there. And then after we add the button, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the attribute inspector. And we're going to go ahead and underneath title plain, there's the text for the button. So we're going to change button to print text. And again, there's tons of different attributes that you can go in and actually change on your button. You can change the color of it, the font color of it, the size of the fonts. A bunch of different attributes that you can go ahead and mess around with. But for right now, what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and lay that button out. So the next thing we're going to do is we need to go ahead and add an action to our actual code in our view controller. So in order to do that, there's the assistant editor, which is just the two linked circles in the upper right hand corner. We want to go ahead and click on that. And what you should see in the right hand panel now is your view controller class. So that is where we're going to go ahead and add an action. So the next step, what we need to do, this is how you would go ahead and add an actual action. You would go ahead and make sure your button is selected. So you want to make sure you can either select it in the view controller scene, or you can select it actually on the storyboard. I usually go with the view controller scene because you know exactly what you're selecting there. Then you want to press down the control key and then hold down your left mouse key and then drag from that button, and you want to drop into your code below the override function. So you want to drop it right in there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set up an action. So you want to make sure the connection is an action. What we're going to name it is just button tapped. And then the type, it'll just be button and then tapped. And then the type, we want to go ahead and change to a UI button. And then there's various events for a button. The default is touch up inside. For this example, we're just going to keep it as touch up inside. So you can just go ahead and select that and then click on the connect command. And basically now we have our connection to the button in our code. Sure.
So I got
Oh, okay.
so let's see here, close that out. Yeah. And then, oh, yeah, so that's what. Yeah, right there. So then I'll, yeah, okay. Now, so then we'll just go. Drag, drop it. Above that. Yeah, right there. You want to make sure that's all good. And then tap. Has to be It does, as long as we're not going to use it, call it anywhere in the code beside the function.
Okay, so what we want to do next is we want to go ahead and all we're going to do is within our function, within the curly braces, we're just going to go ahead and write a print statement, and all we're going to do is say button was tapped. So that's all we're going to do. So when the user taps the button, we should see that message in the console for us. Okay, so after that, we can just go ahead and run our application now and see what happens. So we'll click on the run button. Again, the first time it'll take a while for it to actually build. After it's built once, then it doesn't take quite as long. So now, if it's come up and you've already tapped the button, I don't know why mine's so slow, but if you go ahead and expand the console, so it's the little debug area. Oh, my app is finally coming up. Let me do this here first, and then I'll show you what you should be seeing. So I'll click on it about 3 times. If I go ahead and bring up my app back up and you're showing your console, you should see that printout in your console. So each time you tapped it, it printed that message out to the console for you. So now you know that the button's actually working for you. Just
So I changed the meeting.
oh, then it's messed up.
I could change it back.
Yeah. Yep, it's printing down below. So the one thing you're going to learn with these the one thing you're going to learn with these outlets is if you go in and you rename it after you've established the connection, things are going to get messed up really fast.
I thought we connected it by dragging back over.
Oh yeah. So basically, if you go ahead and click on basically exit out, click on the X to remove the assistant editor. And then if you go ahead and select the button and then go into the last item, the little circle with the right arrow, that's our connections inspector. And basically what that does is it shows you the connections that are connected to that button. So right now we have the button tapped and it's touched up inside. The thing, if you need to change the name and you want it to apply to the actual outlet, there's a specific way you need to go ahead and do that to change it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and show you that really quick. So what you need to do is if you want to change this outlet name, you need to select it. And then after you've selected it, you want to go ahead and click on refactor and rename. So if I did that, I can go ahead and say I want to change it to button tap. I can go ahead and delete that. And then I can go ahead and click on rename. And what that does is it changes the name in the function, but it also, if you go back into the main storyboard and click on that outlet again, it changes the name within the outlet. So if you're changing names on any of these outlets, that's the scenario or the path that you should use to change those names. Okay, so we've added a button. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a switch to our app. So I will just go ahead and click on my object library again. And I will search for a switch. And I will go ahead and drop my switch down below my button. And then I will go into my attribute inspector. And with the switch, you can set the default behavior of it, the state that it's actually in. So in this case, what I want to do is if you click the down arrow and select off, then the switch is off. If you select the down arrow and click on, then the switch is back on. You having issues, Pam?
Yeah, I'm just messing around. I was following your directions, changing it. I pressed something wrong, and then I went like,
Oh, it's commands. Got it back. Yeah, if you do something that you messed up on, hit Command Z. That's how it'll hopefully bring you back to the previous state. Yeah, so I just went up into the library, searched for a switch, and then dropped the switch down into the into my storyboard. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go back into our assistant editor. And we're going to go ahead and create an action for our switch now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some space. And then again, we're just going to do a simple control drag from our switch into our actual code again. and it's going to be an action, and the name of it is going to be switch, and then toggled, T-O-G-G-L-E-D. You can call it anything you want, but it's kind of nice to define names that you understand in there. And then under type, we're going to go ahead and select our UI switch. And for the event, we'll leave it as value changed. So we'll go ahead and click on the connect button. So now we should have our switch toggled function available for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add some code in there. So we're just going to add a simple if statement. So we're going to check to see if sender, and the sender is the actual switch itself. So we're going to check to see if sender is on. So we'll go ahead and call that method. If it is, then we're going to print out the switch is on. Else, we're going to go ahead and print out the switch is off. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and rerun our simulator to actually see if it recognizes that. So we'll go ahead and click on the run button again. If you see this come up, this message, you want to click on stop, because what it'll do is it'll stop the previous simulation run and restart the simulator with your updated code. So if you go ahead, click on the switch a few times, and then you go back into your Xcode again, you should see the switch is on, the switch is off, so on and so forth, depending upon how many times you clicked it. So that is our switch. So what we're going to do next is we're going to add in a slider which allows the user to have a smooth control over a value, such as adjusting a setting. So what we're going to do is, I think I'm just going to leave the assistant editor open here, so don't have to open it again. So, oh, I can't do that. Okay, I need to close my assistant editor, so let me go ahead and close that to get back into my object library. So I'll click on my object library, and what we're going to search for is a slider. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and drag my slider down towards the bottom of the application. So I'll just go ahead and drop it down. If you look at the attributes, what it does by default, it sets the value in the middle, so at 0.5, and then they have a minimum and maximum, but you can go ahead and change that scale if you would like. Two different numbers depending upon the application that you're creating. So we've added our slider. So what we want to do next is we need to go back into our assistant editor. So I'll just go ahead and select that, and we need to do another control drag from our slider that we just added underneath our switch toggled method. So I'll just control drag it over. And then what we're going to call it is slider value changed. And we're going to have it for a UI slider. And then we're going to go ahead and connect it. So we should have our function for our slider. So the next thing what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and type in within our function. We're going to type in print, and then it'll be just sender.value. So what that'll do is when we change the slider value, it'll go ahead and print that value out for us. So we'll just go ahead, rerun our application again. So I'll stop it and rerun it. Our slider comes in, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead, adjust it up a little bit and adjust it back down. And then we're going to go ahead and see what got printed out. As you can see, a bunch of numbers got printed out. So basically, as you're sliding that slider back and forth, it continually prints out what was changed for you. From your starting point, which was 0.5 in our case, and then I think I ended it at, I think it was a 0.1949, so towards the left of the scale. So that's how you can get the value of where the slider actually is in your application, is by that value attribute. Anybody have any questions up to that point? Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to look at text fields. So like I mentioned earlier, it allows the user to enter a small amount of text, such as entering a username or password. So what we're going to do is I'm going to close out of my assistant editor again, and we're going to add a text. If you type in text, you either get a text field or a text view. We want to add a text field. The text view is if you want the user, they're able to write a book in the field. View, you would add a view. We just want a text field. So I'm just going to go ahead and select it, and I'm just going to drop it down below my switch. Text field. Okay, so what we're going to do is with the text field, we're actually going to associate two different actions with it. So the first action is going to be a primary action triggered, and the primary action triggered for a text field is if you hit the enter key. So basically, if you hit the enter key, then it knows that something was actually entered into the text field itself. So what we need to do is we need to open up our assistant editor again, and we need to do a control drag from our text field. And we want to create an action. What we're going to name it is keyboard return key. I'm going to shorten it to return key tapped. And then it's going to be a UI text field for the type. And the event, for this, the event is going to be primary action triggered. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and select in our event primary action triggered. And then we can go ahead and click on the connect key.
get there. So there we get there.
Yeah, when you're control dragging, it's really easy to select the wrong control when you're actually doing that. So you want to make sure, and when you do the control drag, that you have the right control selected. The event is, let me see, primary action triggered. And text fields can also trigger code when the user edits the contents of the field. So say if a user goes in and actually edits what's in the field. So what we're going to do is we're going to do another control drag from our text field. So I will just go ahead and make sure it's selected and control drag back down. And it's going to be an action. The name of it's going to be text changed. And then we'll select a UI text field. And what we're going to select for the event is editing changed. And then we will go ahead and connect that one. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our return key tapped function. And what we're going to do is we're going to add the following statement. So it's just going to be if let text equals sender.text. And then all we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and print the text. And then you can just go ahead and copy and paste that same information into our text changed function. And after you've done that, we can go ahead and run our simulator. Did you guys all get the code? Are you running into syntax errors? Okay.
When I clicked in the text field, I just stuck in the control.
Pardon me?
I clicked in the text field,
Uh-huh.
enter anything, and it just stuff showed up in the console.
There we go. So we can go ahead and kick off the simulator again. So we'll just click on run, click on stop. And I'll just click in the text field and I will just go ahead and type my name, Mike, and hit enter. And then we will go ahead and check our Xcode. Okay, so if everything's working correctly, what'll happen? So each letter that was actually entered into the label was printed out. So what it did was each time the text changed, where I typed in M and then MI, MIK, it would just show the current value in that until, and then when I hit the return, it displayed Mike again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's okay. Yeah, there. Yeah.
So basically, because we added that second text changed function, what it does was that anytime there's a change made in that text box, it'll fire off that function then. And then when we hit the return key, then it just displayed the full name that we entered. So anybody have any questions on that at all? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is, the other thing you can do is you can create outlets that allow your actions to access properties on your views and controls, even if the view or control isn't the sender. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back in, and usually when you add outlets, what you do is you want to add them above the view did load function that's available there. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead, I'm going to add some space up above, and what we're going to do is we're going to add an outlet for our switch and an outlet for our slider. So we'll just go ahead, select our switch, and then we'll control drag. And what we want to call, it's an outlet, so we want to add an outlet for our UI switch, and what we're going to call it is toggle. If you attempted to name it switch, switch is a key word in the switch statement in the Swift language, so that's why we couldn't name it switch. So we're just going to go ahead and name it toggle and connect. And then we're going to do the same thing with our slider. So we will select our slider and drag over, control drag, and slider's not a keyword, so we actually could go ahead and name that outlet slider. So we'll go ahead and connect it. And then finally, what we're going to do is we're going to go into our button tapped function. So I'm going to go ahead and close some of this garbage off, just go into my view controller so it's easier to see. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the following code to our button tap function. So we're just going to type in if toggle, which is now references our switch, is on, then we're just going to go ahead and print the switch is on. And we'll have our else, and we'll go ahead and print the switch is off. Okay, and then after our if else, then what we want to do is we want to add another print statement. So we're just going to go ahead and print the slider is set to slider.value. And then we're going to go ahead and run our simulation. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead, click on the run button, stop it again. And I'm just going to go ahead and just print on my print text button once, and then go back into my Xcode. And now you can see the button was tapped, was printed out, the switch is on, was printed out, and the slider is set to 0.5 for us. So that just shows you an example of how you can actually get the information from a control by adding an outlet to your actual code itself. The other thing that I wanted to show you before we end this application, if you click back onto the main storyboard and say, for instance, you go in and click on your switch. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on my switch. And if you click on the little circle with the arrow inside of it, the attribute inspector, basically what we have here is we have our referencing outlets, and then we have our events. So anytime you want to know if there are any outlets or events on a particular control, you can just go into the little connections inspector, and it'll tell you exactly what events and controls are out there for you for each one of your controls. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover in lesson 2.9. I would like to get a little bit into lesson 2.10 before we end. So there's one topic that we didn't cover in 2.9. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and create a short little video that'll walk you through the final topic. And what that is that adding where you can actually go ahead and click on the screen, and wherever you click your mouse on the screen, it'll return the coordinates of where you clicked on. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and create that video tomorrow.